Thank you for joining us today. I'm Lauren McGee, Senior Customer Success Manager at Ondavi Solutions, where we are charged with transforming transactional data into actionable intelligence to help folks like you make informed decisions to sell more effectively. That's why we're all here, right? We're very excited to be kicking off our Industry Connect webinar series on executing KPIs with your supplier and distributor partners. This webinar is sponsored by Crafted ERP, a wholly unified business management platform that streamlines operations, again, for folks like you, beverage producers who want to reach new levels of market success. You can learn more at craftederp.com. Okay, before we get started and introduce our very exciting guests today, we have a few housekeeping items we want to share. One, note that your microphones are muted, but we do encourage you to participate through the chat and QA features if you have any questions for our guests. We plan on saving time at the end to answer as many questions as we can. Two, we are recording this webinar and we'll send all registrants a link to the recording later this week. Three, and the most exciting one, immediately following today's webinar, you'll be prompted to complete a very short survey. Please do so to receive the complimentary gifts from our sponsors and as well as us at Ondavi Solutions for your live participation today. And that's why we're going to ask you for your mailing address. So if you want to receive the gift, fill out the webinar or the survey at the end. And four, if you didn't already know this, this is the first webinar in our Industry Connect series of webinars that will be continuing in the months to come. We encourage you to participate in the whole webinar series as we're covering a lot of critical topics. In today's session, we'll be discussing the challenges of effectively communicating goals, progress, and outcomes across different tiers in a panel discussion. Our panelists will focus on sharing their best practices for clear and concise information sharing to create seamless collaboration across all the tiers. And to lead us in that discussion is an industry veteran himself and a longtime Grapevines and Ondavi leader, John Collins, who is technically our COO, but if you know him, he does a little bit of everything around here and plays a big role in keeping our customers happy. John, say hello to the largest webinar audience we've ever had at Ondavi. No pressure.
No pressure. Thanks, Lauren. I should have coached you on not using the word veteran because it just means old.
Well, that too, right?
So yeah, the business problem at hand, and happy 6 de Mayo, everyone. Mackie, I'm sorry I had to watch my Milagro consumption yesterday on Cinco de Mayo because this was important to us. So look, I have been around for a little while, and in the Grapevines days, talking about CRM with suppliers, you heard a lot about this problem, right? And both suppliers and distributors, and we had clients in both wanting to see their brands executed correctly, at point of sale, and wanting evidence it was done so, and more importantly, wanting to calibrate those activities and learn from them and qualitatively measure whether those things were working or not and move their brands forward. So we've ended up being able to innovate a product around that, and that's what we're going to talk about today. So we are part of Ondavi Solutions. Ondavi Solutions is a software company. They acquired the company Grapevines, therefore bought my soul apparently, and I worked for them since. I'm joking, but they've also made a number of other acquisitions. Ondavi owns a tool that does data warehousing for an entire enterprise. We have a price sync tool that syncs pricing through tiers to retailers, and we work with retailers with that product. We have a planogram tool. We have some a special trade promotion tool, on and on. But Ondavi's been a very good owner of these companies, and in fact, when they acquired Grapevines, they acquired an idea really called BevPath. It existed as a PowerPoint deck that had been pitched to a bunch of people and something we hadn't really had the resources to build. And they've invested along with great partnership with the people here on this call. And we now have a real product that we're going to talk about. But I think it's a pretty good example of their ownership. So before we get any further, we'll introduce everybody. Of course, I'm John. I was with Grapevines for a long time, and I'm here now, and I'll let everyone else maybe do themselves, and maybe we just go in slide order here so we keep it organized.
So am I next, John? Then I imagine
you
Jeremiah with no photograph.
Yes.
Yeah. So yeah. I'm not sure it's because maybe people are looking for me, John, but there are no photographs.
There's no evidence you exist, Mackie.
There's no evidence I exist, which is fine by me, actually. So my name is Jeremiah Courtney. People know me as Mackie. I work for William Grant and Sons. I've been working with William Grant and Sons. I joke sometimes that I joined William Grant in the last century, which is kind of weird, but I've been with the business for 25 years. And, you know, this, what we're going to talk about today has been a game changer for us, John, in how we use data to sort of manage our business and work collaboratively with our distributor partners in a very real-time sense. And it's been really powerful because, as we all know, tough industry right now, very fast-moving, and I think data can be your friend. And I think, again, what we're doing here with BevPath has been very powerful for us in helping us achieve some of our goals as we move into the next few years of our 5-year plan. So thanks for having me, John.
Of course. Susan, I think you're next.
Hi, I'm Susan Blom. I'm the executive director at Empire Merchants in New York. I also support our upstate distributor company called Empire North. My role working with Grapevines and using the BevPath tool has really been on the implementation standpoint side, making sure that when we start to sit down with the supplier and the distributor and Andavi, Grapevines, and say, okay, how are we going to make this work? Whether it's making the connections from customers that are using Grapevines or not, and or just using the BevPath tool to get the data into, it could be their own proprietary system or just in BevPath. So I've worked with Grapevines for a number of years, and we've been using BevPath now, I think, for about the last 2 years. So.
One of the Bryans is next for sure.
Hi, I'm Brian Parker. I'm the National CRM Manager for RNDC and the supplier lead. So my main responsibility is working with the folks like William Grant to take their key initiatives and turn those into something that the reps can execute and get back the results back to the supplier. And I like to sum it up as, managing the things that aren't sales, right? All the other activities that the suppliers need that aren't sales. And, the fun part is, though, is that these things are all starting to become the same thing now, where, these activities that we're doing are related directly to sales. And so it's just nice to see. I've been doing this for 15 years for RNDC, seen a lot of different forms of CRM, and but this is different. This is, the last couple of years, we are now into the 2020 technology world here, and it's a whole different game.
Hi, everybody. Matt Probilski here. I'm the Vice President of Business Management here at Empire Merchants. I've been working with Grapevines since we started the RFP process when we were looking for a partner, technology partner, to roll out different things, whether it be sales execution, route planning, and now BevPath. So looking forward to sharing our expertise in that today.
And I'm also Brian. I work on RTC, which is our route to consumer project at William Grant. And previously I was at Empire Merchants working with Matt and Susan. So full circle moment here.
Yeah, it's a small industry, isn't it? Right?
Yeah, exactly. Excited to sort of talk about the single source of truth and how Grapevines and Andavi have helped us facilitate that.
Thanks, gang, and thank you all again for making time to do this. Okay, so then we have a couple slides here. We'll talk about the business problem, and then we'll talk about the solution to the problem. But as I think I mentioned, and Brian, you said it, Brian with a Y, you said it really well. All the stuff that isn't sales, right? But hopefully directly leads to sales is the reason you're doing it, right? And many times in trying to win supplier business over the years, we would, show them this sales execution tool, which is not what we're talking about in this webinar. But the point is, they're saying, Yeah, that's great, but I only have certain number of people, right? Whether I'm, Bacardi with 350 people or I'm a small supplier with 10 people nationwide, it's still not enough. Doesn't matter how big you are. I want to know what my distributor's doing for my brand. I don't need a tool because I need to know what my distributor's doing. We hear that a lot, right? And so, this is really exciting because it helps overcome some of that. So yeah, the problem is pretty evident. You have to orchestrate through tiers and ensure things happen. I think Brian, you were going to talk about this a little bit with a why.
Yeah, so we get a lot of requests from different a lot of people across the board. William Grant is our biggest one with this particular tool, and but we get the same request from almost every person we work with. And over the last couple of years, that the request for more information about the field, right, about what their products are doing in these stores is just becoming a louder and louder. So we have to get ahead of it. We have to be able to share that information with them quickly and with as little delay as possible, so people can act on these things as we get the information. So this has been good.
I think I was actually supposed to call on the supplier first here. I went out of order.
Well, and John, just to add to that, I suppose again, we've been using BevPat since its inception. In a time, I think, John, when COVID hit, we took the time actually to do a full segmentation classification of the total universe. And BevPat, working with our distributor partners, it was all about just integrating those data sources into one place in almost like a daily feed where we could actually make some choices. And it was that one version of the truth. When we look at where our brands are showing up in terms of right places, in terms of how our brands are showing up in terms of visibility, etc., John, when we're activating and buying POS to make sure we're allocating that to the places which actually matter the most. And it helps us plan at a much higher level in terms of managing our A&P spends. So it's all about choice for us. And again, it's a very powerful tool because the conversations we're having with our distributor partners, there is no gray area. We're talking the same language because we're actually using one single source of truth, as Brian Becker mentioned. So again, it's been brilliant in a sense of actually being able to plan more effectively, manage our A&P spends much more effectively, and really collaborate with our distributors, because if it's good for us, ultimately it's good for someone else. Because again, when we win, they win. So I think again, we look at it as a very big triple win in terms of us, our customers, and the consumer. So I can't speak highly enough in terms of how valuable it's been for us as a supplier in working well with our distributor partners.
Mackie, just to build on that, I'm surprised I'm going to use an analogy before you, but this system helps us fish where the fish are, right? It's isolating and high spotting the areas where our investment is going to be most effective and efficient, and then going to the A&P spend all the way down to POS and figuring out what type of accounts we're going to have the most bang for buck, implementing and activating in as well.
For us here at Empire, we have so many different suppliers, as every wholesaler does, and it really helps us capture all of this critical information in the same way across our organization. There's so many different in-outlet activities that we track, and it's really powerful information that we can roll up, at a macro level or down to all the way to the account level. So it's really helps us just streamline all this information across our entire organization.
One of the learnings, John, that we had to do, if you don't mind, I don't know, again,
Go.
Tell us to shut up, is we get a lot of data. And it's been now the challenge, is how to use it really effectively. And I think that's a good challenge to have. It's what you do with it, because we were data poor and now it's like feast or famine. Right now it's just, we've got so much data, and I think we're starting to learn more and more how to use it even more effectively. And that's a journey you go on with this, learning. Again, there's very different stages in all of this. Getting it set up was its own challenge, and it's beautiful when it works. It's now using it, and we're finding again that there's more every day we look at it, John, we find more value in it. And it's just knowing when to and how to use the data effectively. I call it a challenge, but it's a beautiful one.
Yeah, historically, these things were done in PowerPoint presentations that were manually prepared with people being texting photos of displays around and pasting them in. And, you know, someone like yourself is, someone like Brian Parker sitting there spending God knows how much time preparing this thing and then presenting it to you, and a lot of manual effort, a lot of,
You know,
sorry.
John, to that point, you know, recapping any program, because a lot of this is about the M&E aspect of it as well. Would you do it again? Would you spend that same money again? You know, waiting for a program to finish and getting sort of 15 or 16 markets to send back 15 different versions of a recap of a program can be in itself so time consuming, and trying to bring all that data together. What we found here, this one single source of truth again, allows us to actually look at that M&E much faster in a very consistent way as well. One view, and that again itself is invaluable and priceless.
For us, it's, you know, the most important thing is strategic alignment, understanding what our supplier wants, what superior execution is, and it's able to, and Grapevine and the dev path helps us cascade those execution standards up and down the organization. And we get to track basically how we are doing against those different goals daily, if not, you know, by the hour. So we are able to look at our data tremendously faster than we ever have in the past. You know, just understanding how many shelves we have or how many cocktail menus we have, that would take weeks to roll up via paper surveys, and now that's a couple of days of surveying, and then it's rolled up the next day. So it's the, you know, understanding what good execution looks like, and then being able to execute and track against it immediately is the real differentiator for us.
I agree entirely with Matt. It's not just the data going back and forth between the supplier and us. It's also on the ground, the field execution. Like he said, it has provided us the ability to get almost real time, you know, metrics back to the salespeople in the field while they're doing this. So that on those last days of the programs and things like that, we're running the hardest, or last days of the month, they have all the details they need to make the right decisions in the field, and there's no delay. So it had an effect from top to bottom. It wasn't just, you know, in the data transmission.
All very good points. So I think you guys have talked a great deal about the business problem. Thank you for that. So what to be done, right? As I said, we had an idea. We had an idea a long time ago, couldn't really afford, or the opportunity wasn't right, whatever reason we hadn't built it. And now it has come to fruition. It's a real tool. And for those of you attending in the webinar going, are they ever going to get specific here? Like I heard, like, you know, we're trying to get fairly specific about the problem. We will get fairly specific about the solution and give you some illustrations. From an Endavi, so we are, you know, we're enabling accounts to be sent from wholesaler to supplier, and KPIs back, and then KPI results and photos and things like that. And we'll get through some more detail. First, just one little, I talked about Endavi making multiple acquisitions, Grapevines and some of these other products, and the Endavi analytics across the bottom. This is where BevPath sort of sits in our portfolio, right? It's its own brand and product, and something that we're putting a great deal of innovation and effort and et cetera into. So how does it work? Like details. Okay, there's a number of different ways to illustrate this, because it's kind of a process, right? And different steps build on each other, and you could start talking about it at different places. I have a slide later that has it like as a wheel, as a circle. We'll get there and look at that. But first, we're just going to talk about what goes from the distributor to the supplier, right? Like that. And that's both the beginning and the end, or I don't know, the middle of the process, however you want to illustrate it. But we want to talk about that. These are primary things, and there are more in the future that we're planning on building, and I have a slide later that will address that. But right now, the product is capable of sending accounts and attributes. As a supplier, you're like, I don't need your accounts. I already got them. I got them in the VIP feed, or, well, yeah, you do, but they have extended attributes about what they call these accounts, and that's how you get to the fish where the fish are. So we're syncing over, and we're actually syncing it to the VIP data and connecting it to the VIP data for the supplier. the distributor also sends over these KPI results, which is like, do I have a 3-case display in an account or whatever? And if yes, send me a photo. It's that specific stuff. Any points to add there?
No, I mean, John, I can give you some, I think for the audience again, I mean, real examples of when this works and how powerful it can be across maybe 3 different areas in terms of like again in merchandising with those attributes. We now have a good sense in our system, which is a direct feed again from the distributor, which is connected to depletions. If there are, say, 300 accounts down in Florida or whatever that are A and B accounts, which are better than, say, the C and D accounts, of those, maybe only 150 of them are merchandisable. That's useful information for us to know when we're actually spending millions of dollars on POS. If we're buying so much POS that a market like Florida takes all 300 freestanding units, well, we know 150 of them probably can never leave warehouse. When we do a new launch of a product, and we do this thing called 1 versus 2, one of our line extensions, a new line extension comes in. When we look at the hero parent brand, we look at our performance of our top accounts in descending order that doesn't have that second facing. And we're thinking, again, we should have 2 facings of a product, especially into our top 50% of our accounts. We can talk to our distributor about that low-hanging fruit. Or even in things like our surveys, John, when we look at sort of execution in terms of menu, and we get sort of visible, sort of yes answers that we have a cocktail listing, but we link that with distribution or depletion data, and we find that an account hasn't bought year to date. It's very hard for us to accept that that menu is actually, I would say, real or an effective menu or the right cocktail. These are great pieces of information, and I would argue again for our distributor partners that it's working together to be smarter, because again, their effort in executing too is time and valuable and effort spent. So I think if we can box very clever and be very disciplined about what good looks like, together, all those 3 examples are very good examples of like how we can make money together. So I just thought, John, just to give you examples about when that information goes back and forth, how we can use it effectively to work together to manage the business for mutual gain, if you wish.
Yeah, for us, all accounts are not created equal. And historically, whether it be a new brand launch or line extension, we would do a shotgun approach and just spray it everywhere. But in working with William Grant and other supplier partners, we've been much more targeted and smarter about where we get the distribution. And DevPath really helps us get the right distribution at the right targeted account with the right merchandising and execution behind it, which in turn we all believe will drive longer sustained growth for us and William Grant and our other supplier partners. That's what really is the differentiator for us.
I can add a little bit to that too, Matt, because when we look at sort of, John, because it is all about segmentation and account classification, when we look at our distribution on any brand, we often find that if you look at sort of, say, 1,000 accounts, every decile of those accounts, we break it down in deciles of 10. The bottom 50% of that distribution is a very long tail. And we find very often that the top 50% is where we get paid. If we can identify more accounts like those that we could invest our money into, rather than incentivize and grow the tail and spend on getting those 1 bottle placements in the wrong places and having to repeat that work year after year after year, it doesn't do anybody any good.
Right.
So I think in terms of being able to box clever by using this data, again, to kind of grow the brand where we should, all of that kind of exists in the data if we work together to kind of manipulate that for gain. So it's just an example, again, John, of you can try to be all things to all people, like Matt says, and not all accounts are created equally. But I think when you kind of use the data as a weapon and you kind of invest properly in that, we can see very strong evidence of how this can work in our favor.
Well, with this open sharing of information, you're setting more realistic targets for your distributor, right? And they're receiving more realistic targets, so they're more than happy to. It's a lot easier for them to try and execute. Is that accurate?
And every conversation we've had with any distributor around the country is that they're very welcoming of this, because again, those conversations become much more strategic. And I think, again, when you can actually show, and we've learned how to monetize a lot of this stuff, John, when we can show the value of what it could lead to from their perspective, not from a William Grant perspective either, by the way, we can show like what that gain can produce. It's a very different conversation we find in those QBRs or those monthly recap moments. So I think, again, it's been very receptive from both sides, again, when we're planning together effectively.
John, I would also, just to your point, say that the transparency does make it easier to plan and track as well. So it reduces the amount of spreadsheets going around for targeted distribution account lists and things like that, because we're isolating and high spotting and transmitting those through the platform versus doing some of the traditional, pen and paper activity.
Yeah, and I'd like to add, there's another piece to this as well. This makes it very simple for the supplier to send us their wish list of the accounts that they'd like to survey, right? But there are also nuances within the markets, like open versus control states, and which accounts can actually be surveyed when you get down on the ground, right? So this allows us to identify the accounts that can truly be surveyed, and that is a good use of all of our time from top to bottom. And we can send custom attributes back through BevPath to the supplier to let them know, hey, this subgroup of accounts may seem at first glance to be, prime for you, but because of these extra details, you may want to, remove them, which increases our execution and our efficiency all around. So that's a real nice part of this as well.
Yeah, thank you for bringing that up, Brian, because I see you do that all the time, and that, for the audience, it's config, not code, and Brian can select any number of fields and choose to send them, and they go tomorrow. And tomorrow, William Grant has their updated account universe with updated attributes. He can either add an attribute, or he can change the way it's calculated in Grapevines or whatever, and move it on. It's pretty cool.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we have created entirely new account attributes in a week and had them passed over, with minimal tech support whatsoever. It's very nice.
All right, maybe we'll move what the supplier sends to the distributor, and then we'll talk about it again in a circle, kind of in context. And so those the supplier does send stuff to the distributor, right? So the accounts come over. Now the supplier creates KPIs, and in the past, you've always set KPIs, right, for your distributors. But they'd go via spreadsheet, they'd go via email, and we want this. Okay, well, and the distributor would say, okay, well, we'll sign up for that, or we'll sign up for it. Maybe altered, instead of 80 accounts, we can only get 60 because there are only 60 that are unsold, and whatever. And then, they've got to be followed up with the PowerPoint at the end of the month or whatever the period is. Here, you're actually sending a record with an identifier, and then when the distributor does activity, it comes back against that record, right? It's all identified and specifically tracked and can be tied to depletions, all automatically.
And this tool really does allow the supplier and the distributor to collaborate, and it is very transparent, so we can see if the supplier sends something over and the distributor knows, what, I'm already doing 10 other things for that supplier. They can maybe say, what, we're going to say no to this one. We say yes to something else. And it just allows that audit trail also to see what we've accepted, what we haven't accepted, and then have that conversation with the supplier.
Yeah, I don't think anyone's pretending the automation is taking the people part of the business out. It's not like you guys, suppliers sitting there dreaming up extra KPIs, sending them over blindly, undiscussed, and they get accepted and somehow executed. It's all the conversations still happen, right? You just don't have to have them around PowerPoint and manual prepared decks.
It's more efficient. Yeah,
and they're better informed as well, John. That's a big part of it.
So we get the KPIs when the supplier and the distributor work together and create a plan. We get the KPIs ready to go for basically, it's not fully automated. There's one step where we have the full freedom to change the way that the sales teams see these things, right? So we can still write the question in a way that we want the sales team to see it, but the results go back to William Grant the way they want to see it, and that's what's important.
You sort of change the execution language into your own, right? And then it's
Yep.
like a translation layer. All right, well, so this is the whole process. We're showing it here as the first step being the distributor sends their accounts with attributes over to the supplier. Supplier then creates and shares KPIs, right, back. So those go over to the distributor to look at and maybe decide, yeah, we can do these things and we can't do these others, and maybe there's negotiation, and and we have examples of suppliers that are using it to actually send a record back to amend it. We have other ones where they have the discussion and then the stuff that gets sent over is already approved, right? Like, because the discussions happen. Whatever, the tool's adaptable. It can work in a lot of different ways. But then obviously the distributor goes and executes, and not all the distributors that are using this are using grapevines. There are other examples, and they execute, they send the stuff back. And then most importantly, to me at least, is here at the end, right? When we talk about, we're actually, for the supplier and the distributor, if they're using our analytics, looking at the rate of sale that what is the rate of sale in an account where this is executed correctly versus a similar account where it isn't executed correctly. And if the lift isn't high enough, then you change the investment pattern, right? And if the lift's even higher than you dreamed, then you double down. But the whole point is to modify behavior with real qualitative metrics, not just like, hey, everybody thinks this display is cool, and so we keep putting it up, right? Like it's more number driven than that.
Yeah, I think, John, in the past, and I've been in meetings where people have gone around the table and show of hands on whether they would do they would repeat a program or not. And it's based on instinct and gut sometimes. This takes all of that away. That the ability to measure the effectiveness of whether that POS item or whatever that program, that activation is worth doing or not, becomes very real in this. And we, again, back to a point, John, but we've had to work with a couple of different distributor partners who, not all of them, use grapevines. So we've had a system like Mobility, but we found a way to integrate this. So in some ways, we've had to learn as we go. But that's the kind of the beauty of it, because every time you kind of pull the curtain back on this, there's something else there that actually is available for you. And I thought it's like, there's an old expression, it's like money for old rope. There is money in this, it's just how you mine for that data and how you kind of go and extract it. So I think, again, it's a very powerful process.
Yeah, the tool is very flexible. As Mackie said, you can work with some distributors that are Grapevines users, and you can link your existing Grapevines KPIs into the BevPath tool. Or if you're not a Grapevines user and you're using another survey tool, we can still link everything back into BevPath, and then also at the end send the data back to the supplier's proprietary system. So at Empire, we've had experience doing it multiple ways, and we get to the same endpoint where the data is flowing back and forth every day.
And again, to that, Susan, you've got, John, and I think it's worth telling you again, your audience here is, again, you've got to work it. If you just think you flick a switch and it'll start working for you. I think both sides, again, you have to really work and get inside the system here. And if you're willing and to do that and put that effort in, I think you'll see the benefit. But to kind of just turn it on and expect it to kind of deliver for you, I'd caution against that. If you're, but if you pull the curtain back on this thing, you will find value in it, left, right, and center.
All very good points.
I would agree with Susan on that as well. As far as we've seen different versions of this where both sides have grapevines, or one side only has grapevines, and we're still able to make it work. Well, as long as we work with each other and both sides are collaborating, you can get there. So it's good.
Yeah. I mean, you've all said it, but we have examples of William Grant works with non-grapevines distributors using the API version of BevPath. And both distributors on this call have suppliers that do not use grapevines that are sending KPIs and receiving results via BevPath. And that was the original design. Okay, so we have a few slides here that are because it's still more specific, right? Sorry if you guys hear panting. My dog has decided it's time to
We're
jump
good.
all over me
I know it's done.
below the scenes here. He's a puppy. So this is an example of the account set that would go over, right? This is all out of our demo system. No real customer data here, but it is illustrative. The accounts go over, right? You get real records, and we do tie them to. If you're a Grapevine supplier, we tie them to your VIP feed. For the suppliers that aren't using Grapevines, I have no idea what they're doing with the account feed they get. I would assume they would do similar, because this makes a heck of a lot of sense. Because if you don't tie it to your VIP feed, you're not going to be able to get depletions and measure the activity out of this stuff. So after that, Mackie, you want to say something?
No, not at all,
Okay.
John.
These are examples of KPIs, right? Like, they're tied to a brand and we've glossed over some detail here, but the suppliers obviously have brands that they sell into the wholesalers. They're sending these KPIs with brand identifiers. They use the EDI codes. Global trade identification numbers to uniquely identify the products, if anybody's wondering about the detail there. So they're using the wholesaler's account number for the account, right? Because they have that in their VIP feed, and that's how we tied the VIP feed to the distributor's feed of accounts. So there's real work going on behind the scenes here done by the tool. That's some of the setup stuff you kind of go through, and it can't just turn it on in 5 minutes kind of thing is what Mackie meant. But once you get all that flowing well, then you've got product tied to account, tied to activity. Ideally, you don't have the product in the activity. Like, don't get Milagro distribution in this account. You get distribution tied to brand Milagro or tied to item Milagro Silver or something like that. And then you can actually measure, or if it's a menu, cocktail menu or whatever it is, if not just distribution related. So we kind of handle all that stuff. We talked about potential transactions we would handle in the future. I mentioned the tool that we have that's price sync for retail. That would be something that we'll call a Bev Path transaction in the future. We have a national account module where suppliers will go win national account business and track their national account business in the tool and then sync that over to. So I'm supposed to have an aisle-in display in this account, or it's an Olive Garden. I'm supposed to be on the cocktail menu at $9.99 with this ingredient, whatever it is. That stuff gets translated over and can be surveyed against them. And there's a number of them on here. There's in the future, we want to tie a bunch of AI and machine learning into this stuff. So, right now it's, hey, what's my rate of sale where I executed this thing? But in the future, we'd like to be able to point out to both partners, have the system point out, did you know where you're doing this and you're also doing this? It's like on fire. It's double the rate of sale with these two things that they naturally correlate, and you didn't know to look for it because, the computer, we're going to ask ChatGPT in the future to help better improve our programming. So
that's great. Also, as a customer to hear, one of the things that Mackie brought up before is M&E measurement and evaluation of our existing spend, and not just from like an incentive or program structure, but also POS. Getting away from that shotgun approach into a more targeted and specific integrated process where we can tie it into the ordering as well, not just the delivery of display. So we're spending smarter and maybe can re-evaluate and reshift those funds to more effective uses. So I'm excited about this. I think that's a great opportunity.
And while we're not a big supplier, I mean, the amount of money we spend on POS and sampling activations is a considerable amount of money, and you really don't have the luxury of getting that wrong. You've got to make every dollar work for you very, very hard nowadays, especially when a supplier like William Grant, John, competing against the likes, and I don't know who's on the call, let's just say Diageo or someone or Pernod, because, we don't have the resource to go toe to toe. So we just have to box more clever in everything we do and make that money work very hard for us. So, not small amounts of money on our end, but still we need to make it work very hard.
Okay, I was to manage to 40 minutes, so we had time for Q&A, and I think we're like 39 minutes in, so I'm just going to congratulate myself on a job well done.
Yeah, absolutely,
sign off now.
John.
Hopefully we have some Q&A. Either way, we'll return people some time, or we'll answer some questions.
We do have one question that we'll give some time for people to keep trickling their questions in. Someone asked if we could elaborate on how the data is transferred.
How the data is transferred. Well, the computers talk to each other, don't you know?
Yes.
So we built a and I'll butcher this in the non-technical format, but we built this in the cloud, right? And it actually sits in Microsoft's cloud, but it's API to API. And we have documented the API. So for the suppliers that don't use Grapevines, they use the same API connections that we use for Grapevines. But if you start with the account feed, right, we have the ability in each of the transactions, we have the ability to like monitor and pull, or to pull on a timed basis, or to receive a push. And like that's about as technical as I get, but I know there's like different people have different opinions or styles about how it works. But this stuff comes over in XML, right? It's an API. That's the way they speak, I guess. So the account, we get this, and it comes over in batches, right? Because it could be a lot of accounts, right? Like, RNDC works in a lot of markets. They have a lot of accounts. So it comes over in some certain amount of batches, and it has quality monitoring and restarts if stuff fails and all that kind of stuff. But it comes over into the cloud, and then it gets pushed on to the supplier, to whatever they're using, right? If it's a Grapevines to Grapevines, if I speak to that, they're received in batches, and these accounts come in, and then it runs a job to sync it up to the VIP stuff. So I don't know who asked the question or in the means, but like, maybe they just meant XML, or maybe they meant, there is a hub in the sky that transmits and receives and sends to the supplier system. So hopefully that answers the question. If the person that asked it wants a more technical answer, then just, send Lauren or I a note, and we'll get you one from the tech team that makes more technical sense.
Absolutely. All right, we've got another question. Oh, did someone want to say something?
I mean, if you don't mind, I'd like to add just like a little bit of he's right about all the technical part, but from the UI, using it every day, what we see, we have the ability to build a custom account set for every market and choose the attributes by market that go to the supplier. And again, we don't need anyone to help us with that. Once you've learned it, you can do it yourself. There are send and receive buttons to force the push and the pull back and forth. So if William Grant calls and says, hey, we just put new KPIs out there today, I have the ability to go out there and press a button and get those into my system. We have views today that we can see every KPI that has come in and manage them, even in mass approving and things like that. And then just based on all of that, we have ideas for dashboards and monitoring and improvement and things like that to the end of the year, just on what we've already been given today.
And maybe just a little Grapevines ad on top of that advertisement, I should have said. You can use a smart account set, right? So if you have criteria there, kind of like a filter, it can auto update. So if a new account gets created that match that criteria, it can leak right in without you having to do work, or you can lock them. But could work either way.
This next question could be for RNDC or Empire here. Are you guys willing to share maybe suggestive KPIs for a small supplier? Technically, the question is, what are key KPIs recommended by the distributors for a small supplier? Something to think about, maybe?
I would have to think about that one for a while, but if you would like to reach out and talk about that, I would be happy to discuss it.
Yeah. All right.
As a vendor, I would say we realize that small suppliers are not going to get the same treatment as the William Grants and Brown Formans of the world from these larger, from just any distributor, right? But there's still a lot of value in them having the account attributes, which the distributor is still willing to send if you're small, because they really want you pushing them to work in the right places. All the same stuff applies. So there is a lot of value, even if you're not going to get 10 KPIs a week or a month or whatever it is. There is value to you, a lot of value in you in being on the same language as your distributor partner.
Mm-hmm.
John, we want more love. What are you talking about?
Like of course Grant. You do.
I would say quickly, my answer would be off-premise displays, and And then on-premise would likely be menu features or back bars. Those are the popular ones. You know,
Yeah.
if you're picking just a few to go after, I'd say those are the ones that most people go for.
Yeah, fair enough.
I could also say, Lauren, one more thing about small suppliers. You know, distributors on this call, I believe both or at least one has for sure already authorized us to send distributor sales for those accounts. So the small guys could get their depletions that way without having to fund VIP for it. So
That's huge.
that's coming pretty soon.
Yes, very exciting. Okay, well, that kind of leads into some of the other questions here. You touched on this lightly, John, but someone's asking, do I need grapevines to run BevPath?
You do not. I recommend, though.
Recommended.
I recommend for obvious reasons. We like to sell grapevines licenses. And I hope that's not a secret. But no, we have examples now. I think you should have a system, right? Because like I sell these systems, so I think you need one, right? And I don't know what you'd do with this data if you didn't have a system. I guess you just put it in your data warehouse and do measurements. But no, your system can be interfaced to BevPath if you have your own.
Okay. I think we have time for one more question here. How long is the implementation process, and does it require the distributor to accept the terms? Like accept this process of BevPath is what I think that they're saying.
Yeah, I don't think you could make your distributor do this without their collaboration, right? Like, because
Yes.
there's a lot of work on both sides. Like Brian said, you start with an account set, right? And I mean, we could send KPIs without accounts, but that, you know, yeah, less successful. So I would think you need a collaboration with your wholesaler to get this going. Yes. How long does it take? Yeah, we got different examples here. So in the beginning, it took a long time and we kind of got things calibrated, and then we've added other markets and we've added others. So we, you know, a couple months we've been able to add, you know, Brian was able to add another large supplier recently, you know, pretty quickly, less than 90 days, right, Brian? And that it's kind of nationally and it's big. So
the good news is if you're with R&DC or Empire, they're already willing, right? So that's a done deal,
sure.
right?
It was roughly 90 days for what I consider a challenging project. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
The William Grant project was much smoother and took less time because they were on point and prepared and cooperative and helped us, had a plan, you know. And then, you know, on an opposite project, probably closer to, you know, 90 days. It just depends on the cooperation and the collaboration.
And listen, I would argue again, Brian, we're still adding even, you know, the fundamentals and the basics, yes. And we were somewhat guinea pigs at the time. But even today, we continue to add more layers to this thing. And I think, you know, how big is up? I'm not sure. We continue to see more and more ways to use it. And we continue to work with grapevines and adding those little elements. So I think, again, it's probably one of those things that, yes, the basics fundamentals will take you a period of time. And I think the beauty beyond that it's as long as you want, really, in adding more layers to it.
Well, very cool. Well, before we wrap up, are there any closing thoughts from our panelists that, you know, kind of final words you want to say before we wrap up?
No, just thank you for the opportunity today. I appreciate it.
Awesome.
Yeah. Thank you all so much.
Thank you for having us.
Appreciate it.
Yep. Thanks.
Okay.
If there's any quality to this event, it was because of you guys and gals.
Absolutely.
So
Yes.
thank you. Also, I heard, I mean, I'm kind of getting filtered stuff here that some of the Q&A, there was a glitch with the Q&A and if you submitted a question and we didn't answer it, we'll get back to you, and an apology, but I think they didn't all get.
Absolutely. Okay, well, as we wrap up, we just like to thank everybody for joining today. It was a really rich discussion. We hope you thought so too. We especially like to thank both Brians, Jeremiah, aka Mackie, Susan, and Matt for taking the time to share experiences with us. And we'd like to thank you, our viewers, for participating. Don't forget to complete that post-webinar survey for those of you who want to receive the complimentary gift. I'm hoping that's all of you, from all of us at Ondavi Solutions, as well as our sponsor, Crafted ERP. So look for that survey to pop up as soon as we close this webinar. As a reminder, if you felt this was a good use of your time, we encourage you to pre-register for the second Industry Connect webinar series, which will include a special message from our CEO, Lisa Winnie, and industry leader, Ben Salisbury, as they discuss the 3 keys to driving revenue in 2024 and beyond. That's a wrap from all of us at Ondavi Solutions. Hope you enjoy the rest of your day. Cheers, everyone. Until next time.
Thanks, everyone.